Hey everyone! Ready to spend those hard-earned gems but not sure which banners are worth it? Well, you're in the right place. Today, we're diving deep into Anime Reborn and ranking every unit from best to, well, maybe some you'll want to avoid. We've combed through all the towers in the game, tested them in every mode, and brought you a tier list that's going to make your gem spending decisions way easier. So whether you're grinding PvE or crushing PvP, we've got the scoop on who you should be adding to your lineup. But here's the fun part. This isn't just any boring list. We're breaking down exactly why each unit shines or flops, giving you all the juicy details you need to dominate Anime Reborn. From the absolute beasts of the S tier to the surprisingly decent lower tiers, we've got it all. So, grab a snack, sit back, and let's jump into the ultimate Anime Reborn tier list. I'm quickly moving on to the video, and I'm ranking units in Anime Reborn. Before we start, if you enjoy these types of list videos, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Enjoy watching! The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Ichigo, Luffy PTS, Naruto, Sakura, Usagi PTS, Susake, Kurulin, Zero PTS, and Tintin. Alright, so we're diving into the underdogs of Anime Reborn with some of these C-tier units. Look, these units aren't exactly going to carry your team to glory, but a few of them might surprise you in the early game if you know how to work their quirks. Let's start with the standout in this crowd, our friend Ichigo. Now, Ichigo's got some decent range, his DPS isn't bad, and best of all, he can target air units. If you're just getting started, he's probably the best hybrid to have on your side. You might actually find yourself relying on him a lot in those early stages. Next up, we've got Luffy PTS. When you're first logging into Anime Reborn, you're gonna see this guy among your default options, and honestly, he's not a terrible pick. Luffy's got a solid cone AoE attack, which gives him a little boost in crowd control compared to the other C-tier options. So, if you want to clear the field a bit without breaking the bank, Luffy's got your back, at least until you find someone stronger. And then there's Naruto. Now, don't let his rare label fool you. He's actually kind of useful. His big thing, he gets a damage boost for every other Naruto within range. So, if you're going for some kind of Naruto army strategy, this guy might just surprise you. He's not groundbreaking, but for a rare unit, he's got some utility if you play around with him. Moving down the ladder, we have Sakura. Let's be real, Sakura isn't exactly the queen of DPS, but hey, she's cheap to place, so if you're strapped for resources, she's a decent filler. Just don't expect her to turn the tide of any major battles. Usagi PTS, though, actually manages to redeem himself a bit by being one of the few rare units that can target air. So, if you're desperate for some anti-air support, Usagi's your guy, at least until you can replace him. Now, if you're looking at Susake and thinking he'll be a solid pick, lower those expectations. His DPS is, well, let's call it okay for a rare unit. He's not terrible, but he's definitely not great either. It's a similar story with Kurulin, who like Usagi can target air, making him handy on some of the early story maps. But beyond that, probably not sticking around in your lineup. And we're wrapping up with the true meh of C-tier, Zero PTS, and Tintin. Zero's DPS is pretty low. There are just better options, plain and simple. Tintin, though, she's got a passive that gives her a 10% attack boost, but let's be real, that barely makes a difference. If she's all you've got, sure, throw her out there, but don't expect any miracles. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Boulder Lee, Yasuke, Vigoto, Heie Inoke, and Sijin PTS. Alright, so you want to step up your game in Anime Reborn, but you're eyeing those B-tier units and thinking, are they really worth it? Well, let's dive into it because some of these picks might surprise you. These guys are like the solid middle ground. Not the absolute best, but they've got some quirks that can be a lot of fun if you know how to play to their strengths. Starting with Boulder Lee, this guy's got serious potential if you're rolling in infinite mode. At max upgrades, he turns into a total AoE, area of effect machine, raining damage down on anything in his path. Now, fair warning, fully upgrading him takes time and patience, so he might not shine as brightly in shorter modes. But if you're in it for the long haul, Boulder Lee's your guy. The payoff can be amazing if you're willing to stick with him and level him up. Then we've got Yasuke. Solid DPS, solid range, but he's still got some catching up to do compared to other legendaries. Yasuke's like the dependable friend who's there in a pinch, but maybe not the star of the show. He can hold his own, and if you're missing some of the top tier units, he can absolutely step in and get the job done. Just don't expect him to steal the spotlight, he's more like the strong supporting cast. Vigoto is an interesting one. His passive gives him a bit of a range boost, which sounds awesome at first. But in practice, it doesn't quite lift him into the A or S ranks. Vigoto is the unit you'll want to bring along for that extra push when you're just starting out. But once you get more powerful legendaries, he might find himself on the bench. Still, that boost is a nice touch, and he's worth trying out if you're still building up your team. And then there's Heie. Oh, Heie. He's got the low range and damage that put him a little lower on the list, even for an epic. Honestly, if you're looking to clear stages efficiently, Heie might not be your first pick. He's the kind of unit that you'd use in a pinch, but don't expect him to lead the charge. Similarly, Inoki shares a lot of those same struggles. Low range, not much punch. They're both hanging out on the lower end of the epic pool, but hey, they're there if you need them. Now, if you're in the rare unit game, Sijin PTS is your MVP. He's actually the only rare unit that's worth building out, and he's got some incredible perks. Full AoE with a burn effect, awesome range, and 6 max placements. Sijin's got the power to carry you through those early stages without breaking a sweat. Plus, he's got that fiery touch, which just makes him feel like more of a boss. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Genos, Uryu, Kuzar, Killa, Zenit, and Neja. Alright, buckle up because we're diving into the awesome world of A-tier units in Anime Reborn, where legends come to play, but sometimes the real stars aren't quite who you'd expect. Let's kick it off with Genos, our versatile hybrid with a spicy burn effect in his kit. Now, don't get me wrong, Genos is a solid choice. He brings that dependable burn damage to the table. But if we're talking top-tier legendaries, there are a few that can outshine him. Still, he's a fantastic option if you're building out your roster and need a little heat on the field. Next up, we have Uryu, who's kind of like that utility player you turn to when you're short on options. She's not exactly the strongest stat-wise, and her passive only gives a 25% chance to slow enemies, which can feel pretty underwhelming. But if you need a hill unit and you're lacking in air targeting power, she's got you covered. Sometimes just having that hill unit makes all the difference, so Uryu is worth considering if you're missing any heavy air hitters. Then there's Kuzar, and oh boy, if you're looking for high DPS, this guy's got it. With his super low SPA and a solid range, Kuzar's one of the best legendary DPS units in Anime Reborn. If you're just starting out, he's honestly a dream come true, keeping enemies at bay with consistent rapid attacks. You'll quickly see why he's a favorite for early game players. This guy doesn't mess around, and if you get your hands on him, you'll understand the hype. Moving on, let's talk Killa, the support unit who's all about bringing utility to your team. He's got a stun, a pretty good SPA, and get this, he can target air units at max upgrades. Now, while Rookie and Darkbeard might be slightly better overall, Killa's versatility makes him a gem, especially if you haven't lucked into a legendary with air targeting abilities yet. He's like that secret weapon you pull out when the situation calls for something extra, and trust me, he can deliver. Finally, we've got two epics that deserve a shout-out, Zenit and Neja. Zenit is a total boss right out of the gate, with full AoE on placement. Perfect for anyone just getting started. Just keep in mind not to go wild with upgrades, or you'll lose that sweet full AoE with his second attack. And then there's Neja, who's a bit of a sleeper hit. He's honestly not great on placement, but max him out, and he becomes a powerhouse epic unit, boasting full AoE, solid range, and decent DPS. For an epic, Neja brings the thunder once he's fully upgraded. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, King Rimura, Oda Super Gohu, Pain, Sun Prodigy Blazing, Water Goddess, Darkbeard, and Rookie. Alright, so let's dive right into these top tier units in Anime Reborn and see what's really worth your time and grind. You're here for the best, right? But don't be fooled. Just because these units are in the S tier doesn't mean they're all shining stars. Some definitely deserve their spot, while others, let's just say it's debatable. Let's start with King Rimura. Now, he's technically a secret unit, so you'd expect him to bring something special, but in reality, meh. His SPA, or attack speed, is painfully slow, and he lacks that sweet full AoE. Sure, his range and damage aren't bad, but if you're thinking about putting all your resources into him, think again. He might be the king, but he's probably more of a duke at best in the current meta. Now, moving on to Oda. Here's a unit with a massive AoE attack at max upgrade, and he's got decent stats across the board. He sounds solid, right? But here's the kicker. Oda can't target air units. I mean, for a mythic, you'd expect a little more versatility. He'll do fine on the ground, but if there are flying enemies you need to worry about, Oda's sitting on the bench, so great pick for those big waves on the ground, but don't rely on him to cover all your bases. Then we have Super Gohu, a hill unit with decent DPS. Sounds promising, but there's a catch. His line attack might seem useful, but it's a bit limiting. And don't even get me started on his passive. It's, well, kinda garbage, honestly. Still, if you can look past his flaws, he's not the worst hill unit you can pick up. He can pack a punch, but he's not winning any awards for versatility. Alright, Pain is up next, and he's all about that support life. Pain's got a full AoE with a stun every 4 attacks, so if you're looking to hold enemies in place, he's your guy. But here's the thing, his DPS is pretty underwhelming. So while he's useful in terms of utility, if you're counting on him to be your heavy hitter, you might be a little disappointed. He's great if you're building a support-heavy strategy, but there are better options for raw power. Then there's Sun Prodigy Blazing, an early access exclusive. He's got a burn effect and some decent DPS with 4 max placements, which sounds nice, right? Here's the deal though, he's a bit of a temporary fix. Sure, he's fine for getting through the early game, but as soon as you get your hands on better mythics, he's probably going to be the first one you swap out. He's like that starter character you're grateful for but don't keep around forever. And finally, we have the support units that everyone loves, Water Goddess and Darkbeard. Water Goddess is a range buffer who can also chip in some decent damage. She's especially handy when paired with other high DPS units. Then there's Darkbeard, and this guy is straight meta. Full AoE with slow on his attacks? Yes, please. But fair warning, his upgrades are pricey, so be prepared to sink some resources into him. If you've got the funds though, he's worth every penny. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Dragon Emperor, 21, Greybeard, Hawkeyes, Itaha, Brolio, Speedcart, and Bulba. Alright, let's talk about the heavy hitters in Anime Reborn. The S+ tier units that make the grind worthwhile. You know the type, units so powerful they practically play the game for you. And in Anime Reborn, we've got a lineup that's nothing short of legendary. These units are more than just stats. They're absolute game changers, the cream of the crop. And trust me, once you've got them, there's no going back. Let's dive in and see why these characters are absolutely worth the hype. First up, Dragon Emperor. This unit's got it all. Insane AoE damage, hybrid versatility, and even a support passive once he's evolved. He clears waves with ease, and that AoE is no joke. The only downside? Getting him is a serious grind. But once you've powered through, the Dragon Emperor is a full-on powerhouse that elevates any team he's on. If you're looking for a strong foundation, this is it. 21 is another standout who deserves every ounce of praise she gets. At max upgrade, she loses her AoE but gains a huge range boost, so she's unstoppable. Plus, as a hill unit, she can just sit back and rain damage down on everything in sight. She's pretty much the MVP of every mode, solo carrying through even the toughest battles. If you've got 21 in your lineup, just sit back and watch her work her magic. And then there's Greybeard, who brings a whole different kind of power. He's one of the few non-secret units with full AoE, and that range is phenomenal. Plus, being a hybrid means he doesn't need a hill, so he fits anywhere. Evolved Greybeard even stuns enemies, making him an absolute must-have for taking on the toughest mobs. It's like having a tank, DPS, and crowd control all in one. For boss fights, Hawkeyes is the guy you want on your side. His passive gives him an insane damage boost against bosses. We're talking plus 100% damage, and it jumps to plus 250% when he's evolved. This guy is the ultimate boss killer. Add his cone AoE and low SPA, and he's a solid choice for mob clearing too. Hawkeyes is your one-way ticket to a smooth boss run. Finally, we can't ignore the resource gatherers, Speedcart and Bulba. Speedcart's got a high price tag, but when you're playing Infinite, she's essential. And if you're in it for the short game modes, Bulba's your go-to. She's affordable and gets you the money you need fast. With these two in your lineup, resource management becomes a breeze. And that's the S+ tier dream team. These units aren't just strong, they're absolute legends in the Anime Reborn meta. Each one has a unique edge, whether it's insane DPS, strategic utility, or solid support. So, if you're aiming to dominate, these are the units that'll get you there. Happy grinding, and may the RNG gods be ever in your favor. The video ends here. See you in another video. Don't forget to subscribe.